I'm delighted to bring up Trevor, who's been a great friend for a long time, since even before he helped get us on the SPLC hate list. We've had him speak a number of times. He's a fellow of the American Freedom Alliance. We had created an award a number of years ago, I don't remember what year it was, that we gave to Phil Haney. Are you familiar with Phil Haney? He was the DHS whistleblower. We created an award, the American Freedom Award, to honor him, and the next year, the person we gave it to was our great friend Trevor Loudon, who has just been such a steadfast fighter for all things true and good. So please welcome Trevor Loudon.
Hi, thanks so much, Karen. Can you all hear me okay? Can you understand the southern accent all right? I worry about that a lot, okay? As you may know, well, look, any refugees from California here? One or two? Okay. I was in Los Angeles recently and I bought some food from a vendor and he said to me, "You have an accent. Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm originally from New Zealand." He said, "Well, where is that?" So to make it really simple for him, I said, "Look, it's down in the South Pacific near Australia." He said, "Ah, right, where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes from." But speaking of New Zealand, I was there last year. My dad is 91, and he was talking about World War II and how terrified they were of a Japanese invasion. And we both acknowledged that if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers who stopped the Japanese at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway, I probably wouldn't be here, people. You know, so anybody, that's why, you know, America is the tent pole that holds up the whole tent. If America goes down, we're all history. We're all toast. So it's so vitally important we preserve this country. So I want to talk about two main aspects of how the Chinese are influencing this country that are not often considered. One of them is directly relevant to Georgia here, but I'll start with this. Does anybody remember when Virginia was a really, really red state? And then it went blue and bluer. They took a little bit back a couple of years ago, and then they lost that again, mostly in the last election. Well, there's a pro-Chinese communist group in this country, works on the ground. It's descended from the Students for a Democratic Society and all this kind of thing. It was called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Now it's called Liberation Road, and I will use that term. Well, in 2005, Liberation Road set up a voter registration organization in Northern Virginia called New Virginia Majority. And they went out and signed up about 300,000 minority voters over about 6 or 7 years. And then they worked with Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, he personally signed 200,000 pardons for Virginia felons so that they could vote as well. And that 500,000 voting base is what they used to flip that state. Now, the reason New Virginia Majority was so successful, look, in 2018, when they had every major office in the state, they put an op-ed in the New York Times, New Virginia Majority, we flipped Virginia. They claimed full credit for it. They didn't mention the communist bit. Well, the reason they were so successful is they were using GIS computerized maps. Every single precinct in Virginia was mapped out. They could tell you the voting patterns. They could tell you the ethnicities of certain neighborhoods, income levels. So they knew to send Iranian volunteers into Iranian neighborhoods. They could send Puerto Rican volunteers into Puerto Rican neighborhoods. Ghanaian volunteers, whatever it took to maximize their get out the vote and their voter registration. Now, those maps were generated over 10 years and are still being generated, I believe, by a Liberation Road communist called Steve McClure. who is a graduate of the George Mason University Geography Department. Now, he has been making those maps and still is working directly from the Geography Department of the Wuhan University, China. So they're using Chinese computers, Chinese staff, Chinese money to create maps which are used by pro-Chinese communists to actually flip districts, to flip Virginia blue. Now, this is part of a much wider network, because Liberation Road is the group that gave you Black Lives Matter. That is their front. They are headquartered in the Bay Area, and through the Chinese Progressive Association, they have very, very close ties to the Chinese consulate. And so what they're doing, I have it on tape, some of these people talking about how they run their messaging past the Chinese consulate before they do anything, how they will go out there and you know, one of them said, our job is to defend China by bringing down President Trump, specifically in those words. Now, if you think about this, if you were Xi Jinping and you wanted to bring down the United States, would you want to risk billions of dollars on a trade war which you might lose? Would you want to spend trillions on a shooting war before you were ready? Or would you rather spend a few $billion guiding and directing US communists to target certain states to flip them in the right direction and buying up American politicians? What do you think would be the more effective way of doing things and the safer way of doing things? See, this is what I write my books about. You know, I say there's at least 100 members of the US Congress, including Nicomer Williams here. Got it all about Nicomer Williams and Hank Johnson in this state, who are basically working for the enemy. At least 100. There's no background checks in Congress. And also, you know, so what they're doing, they are basically working the South. This is the strategy. The Chinese communists call the South the new Confederacy, because it's the backbone of the Republican Party and conservative Christianity. But it also has large minority populations, Black, Latino, increasing Asian American populations, especially around Atlanta here. And all of these people are quite socially conservative, but they all tend to lean heavily Democrat. So that the Chinese communist philosophy, which is now the Democrat philosophy, is to target all the resources into the South, to basically energize the minority populations in the South by running candidates of color like Andrew Gillum down in Florida, like Stacey Abrams here, to basically move the South, to flip the South. Now, this network run by Liberation Road has an organization in North Carolina called the Carolina Federation, which is why Carolina has a Marxist, left-wing, pro-Chinese Democrat governor. They are the reason that they have an organization in Arizona called Lucha, which made 8 million phone calls and knocked on 1.8 million doors in the last election, which is why Arizona has 2 left-wing Democrat senators. They also had, who saw the movie, Catherine Engelbrecht's movie, 2000 Mules? Okay, she identified a network of non-profits who were using Black Lives Matter activists to stuff ballots in key cities, right? Key targeted cities. Well, I identified the same organizations and the same networks by tracking the Liberation Road network back to the Chinese consulate. They set up an organization in 2019, I think it was, called Seed the Vote. And Seed the Vote had black leaders organizing communities in Wisconsin. They had Detroit Action in Michigan. They had Pennsylvania Stands Up in Pennsylvania. They had the New Georgia Project here, Stacey Abrams' organization. They had Lucha in Arizona. You know, these are all the key states. And they claim in their own literature they won those states for Biden-Harris by using the energy of the Black Lives Matter protests, which they did, completely organized by the pro-Chinese communist groups, 100%. You know, George Floyd was only the third attempt to start the riots. They tried to start the riots with the famous jogger case here in Atlanta, but that didn't quite fire. They tried to start the riots when Breonna Taylor, a young black woman, was killed in Louisville, Kentucky, but again, it didn't quite spark. George Floyd was so public and right where they had a big presence, that's when the riot started. But if it hadn't started then, it would have started in Tucson the week after, or Spokane the week after that, or whatever. They were out there trying to get the riots going. And then they used the energy of that, all these young black fired up young Latinos and black kids and young white college kids who thought America is irredeemably racist. The only way to stop the racism is to elect Biden-Harris in 2020. So yes, I believe there's all sorts of shenanigans going on in elections, but we need to understand there are communist-backed voter registration organizations in all of the key southern states, all of the key swing states. They're working right under our very noses doing this stuff. And as I said, you know, these are the reason why you have John Ossoff now. This is the reason why you have Raphael Warnock. You know, Raphael Warnock is a hardcore Marxist. I write about him, and there I got 30-page article on Raphael Warnock, his communist connections going back to New York, even going back to the days of Martin Luther King, the Marxists who mentored him. A complete Marxist. John Ossoff was put in place by the hard left, and the very first thing that John Ossoff did when he became the senator was to prevail upon Joe Biden to put Daniel Blackman, a Marxist, a member of Democratic Socialists of America, to make him head of the EPA for the Environmental Protection Agency for 6 southern states. So this is what you've gone on in the South. The goal is flip the South. You get. They've already got Georgia purple. They've got North Carolina purple. They've got Arizona purple. If they can consolidate those states and turn them blue and pick up one or two more after that, the electoral map tells you they will have a one-party state in this country, and then they will legalize 30, 40 million illegal immigrants who will then vote 90% for one party, and then you wonder how we're going to get out of that mess. So the basic electoral stuff is critically important, and China is deeply, deeply involved. Now, I want to talk about another aspect of it, elite capture. What was the very first thing that Joe Biden did when he took office? Well, pipeline was the first thing. Keystone Pipeline shut it down. 11,000 American workers out of jobs because Native Americans were protesting in the Dakotas. Well, those protests were organized by Judith LeBlanc of the Communist Party USA, which through the Native Organizers Alliance, the Communist Party USA is loyal to the Communist Party of China and even today, Putin's Russia. As a result of this great work and some voter registration work she did, she was allowed to nominate her very close friend, Deb Haaland, as U.S. Secretary of the Interior, a complete no-name, a second-term congresswoman from New Mexico, and a Marxist. Judith LeBlanc mounted a political campaign, Deb for Interior. You can see this on Facebook. It's not a secret. They got a celebrity endorsements: Alyssa Milano, Mark Ruffalo, Sarah Silverman, Hanoi Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, Cher, Deb for Interior. She was nominated and she was by Biden and confirmed with 4 Republican Senate votes. Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins. When I say Republican, you know what I mean, okay? Democrats in drag, effectively. So she is now Secretary of the Interior. She has purview over 20% of America. She is shutting down every single energy lease she possibly can. She's closed off Alaska to drilling. She stopped uranium mining in northern Colorado. She is starving us of energy. At the same time, Biden has sold off 50% of America's strategic oil reserve, which is supposed to be what we fight a war with. I'm told we have enough oil to fight a war for 18 days right now, and he said publicly they are not going to replenish it. Then you've got Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, mentored by the famous Michigan Marxist Millie Jeffrey, the woman who got Geraldine Ferraro on the Democrat ticket back in 1988. They've been doing this a long time, people. But this is the woman who tells us that all US military vehicles are going to be electric by 2030. Now, you could say this is ridiculous, but can you imagine the money that's going to be wasted on that? When China is building 9 ships to our 1, they're going to spend our taxpayers' money converting our vehicles to electric. But it's not all bad, because I'm sure there's going to be an agreement worked out that if a war breaks out, that American troops will get time out on the battlefield to recharge their tanks and APVs. That would only be fair, wouldn't it? You could call it stupidity or you could call it sabotage. What do you think is Occam's razor? What's the simplest explanation? Given Joe Biden's 40-year history, started working in the interests of the Russians in the 70s, the Iranians in the late 70s, and China since at least 2001. But one more, Julie Su, Secretary of Labor, a Marxist, a pro-Chinese communist, put in place as Secretary of Labor by Kent Wong and Stuart Quo of Los Angeles, both former leaders of the Communist Workers' Party, both militantly pro-China. She is now Secretary of Labor, and we have seen a strike wave like we haven't seen for many years, and they are now getting ready to hold major strikes in Long Beach and the warehousing of the Inland Empire. That is the major supply hub for the West Coast people. If they can shut down Long Beach, which they're planning to do, we will see empty shelves all over America really, really quickly. And Julie Su, basically a Chinese puppet, will be the Secretary of Labor when that occurs. So we are deeply penetrated at the cabinet level. Cardrona, education, is a Marxist. Buttigieg, transportation, is a Marxist. They're all Marxists. But here's the one thing I want to finish on. What do? We need to treat this voter problem and this penetration problem as a criminal problem. And we need to use the same techniques we take down criminal gangs to fix this. Now, during the 30s, the Purple Gang, otherwise known as Murder, Inc., was rampaging across America, assassinating people at will. And they had cops on the payroll, and nobody dared to testify against them, so they just operated with impunity. Well, they brought in a Republican prosecutor from New York called Thomas Dewey. Said, take down Murder, Inc., we don't care how, do it. He personally interviewed 1,200 young men, personally, to get in a small elite squad of the best and the brightest. Then he started going out and arresting low-level Murder, Inc. people, low people, get them on burglary or extortion charges. And they say, sir, we can put you in jail for 3 years, or we can give you witness protection and a new identity if you will rat on those above you. And they started ratting, and they got higher and higher up. They put the leaders of Murder Inc. on the electric chair, and in 2 years it was gone. So this is what you have to do with the vote scams that are going on in the big cities. We have to have a federal agency. In Florida, we have an electoral integrity agency that goes after vote fraud. Do this federally, and you start doing RICO lawsuits in the big cities across the nation. You cannot fix the vote fraud problems in Los Angeles from California. You can't fix them in Chicago from Illinois. You have to go in federally, you catch low-level people, and you give them a deal. Immunity from prosecution if you tell us who paid you. Then you go up the chain, up the chain, up the chain, until you have the top of the chain, and those people go to jail. You'd only have to put 15 people in jail in this country for 10 years, and vote fraud would not be a problem. It's not actually that hard to stop. But on the foreign infiltration front, this is what the next Conservative president has to do. You set up a new intelligence agency. Not from the CIA, not from FBI, just new people from IRS, from special forces, from sheriff's departments. You might interview 20,000 people to get 2,000. Super patriots, super vetted, super compartmentalized, so if you get a few bad apples, it doesn't compromise the whole lot. And it's all about cleaning out foreign infiltration. That is the whole purpose of this new agency. Then the president declares a 3-month amnesty. Every traitor in America, every foreign agent, everybody who's been compromised, everybody's been paid off, no matter who you are, you've got 3 months to either leave the country and never come back, surrender your passport, surrender your green card, whatever, go and never come back, or turn yourself in and register with the new agency. You got 3 months. See, a lot of people get into treason. They get into a business deal they didn't quite understand. Their company is involved in shady deals. They get compromised. They get caught in bed with somebody they shouldn't have been in bed with. They want out, but they're in a vice. And if they know they get caught, they're going to jail. Give them a way out. Give them a way to come clean with the American people. If the president offered such an amnesty, I would say you'd see 100,000 Chinese leave the country in 3 months. You'd see a whole bunch of Russian mobsters sell their mansions in Miami, go back to Moscow. You see cartel guys going back across the border. You'd see a whole bunch of big tech guys standing down for family reasons. A whole bunch of senators doing the same thing. A whole bunch of academics would retire their tenured positions. You'd see the biggest cleansing of the system you'd ever seen, because none of these people would be able to trust who they were dealing with. The Iranian businessman paying off the senator wouldn't know if the senator was wearing a wire at their meeting, and the senator wouldn't know if the Iranian operative was wearing a wire. All of these networks would melt down, their trust would be completely destroyed, and you'd have, I believe, several thousand people coming forward to register that they had done bad stuff. And they would be then given an opportunity to appear in court, to testify against those who paid them off, against those who were dealing with, and they would get a chance to start their life again. Never hold public office again, but they could go and live in Idaho. They could clear their name. They could just make their peace with the American people. Their punishment would be between them and God, effectively. But I think this kind of thing is what we use to take down organized crime. It's what the British used to destroy the thuggy bandit networks in India in the 19th century. It's what Giuliani used to some degree to take down the 5 families of New York. But we've got to apply this to the voter registration cartels. We've got to apply this principle, catch the low-level people, give them amnesty if they will rat out their friends. And we've got to apply this to the foreign infiltration. I believe this would drive tens of thousands of traitors out of the country, bring a whole bunch of people forward, and the very few people who didn't take the deal and tried to hang on, we would have the evidence to put them away for 40 years. And we'd only have to jail 1,000 people to get the American people to finally understand the depth of the penetration and accept the security measures going forward to make sure this never, ever happens again. I believe some form of this strategy is the only way we're going to clean out the treachery to the degree we need to do to make sure we can bring this country around. Because as I say in my books, we got 100 members of the House and 40 members of the US Senate, including both of your senators and 2 of your congressmen, who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in this county, but they are running the main committees in your Congress. That is why we're vulnerable. The enemy could never have done to us what they have done if they hadn't co-opted so many of our leaders first. And we are not going to survive unless we clean them out. But it doesn't mean thousands have to go to jail, but it means the American people have to understand the problem. So that's where I think we're at, and that's my strategy for clearing it out. I hope it's been valuable, and I hope to see you over there at lunchtime. Thank you.